The rain was coming down in heavy sheets over Springfield, Illinois, turning the neon lights of the old diner into streaks of color on the wet pavement. Inside, Wick and his 6-year-old daughter Lily huddled over bowls of hot soup, steam fogging up the window beside them. They had squeezed this small luxury into a tight budget, and both savored each spoonful as if it were a celebration. "Dad, do you think Mom would have liked this place?" she asked quietly, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "She loved any place that had pie on the menu," he replied, forcing a smile. "Maybe one day we'll bake a pie together in her honor." Wick's mind was already on tomorrow's 12-hour shift at the garage when a timid voice behind him asked, "May we have your leftovers?" 5 children, hair plastered to their heads from the downpour, clung to a thin woman as if she were their last lifeline. Their clothes were soaked, their faces drawn. The oldest boy stared at Wick with wary brown eyes that mirrored hunger and hope. "I'm sorry," the woman whispered, her voice raw from cold and embarrassment. "They haven't eaten since yesterday. We'll leave right away." "Sit down," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "We're going to order more food. No one's leaving hungry." He motioned to the waitress, and soon grilled cheese sandwiches and cups of cocoa lined the table. As the children devoured the food, the strain in the woman's shoulders eased. Wick didn't know it yet, but this woman was Elena, once the heiress to a shipping empire, now a widow on the run. Her father, Charles Charlesworth, had cut her off when she dared to marry for love rather than status, and he was determined to seize her children to preserve his dynasty. Wick saw none of that history, only a mother in need. Lily scooted over, inviting the twin girls to sit beside her, their laughter briefly drowning out the hum of the diner's old jukebox. "I can't thank you enough," she murmured to Wick between bites. "I'm Elena. These are Ethan, Noah, Hannah, and Sophie. We're just passing through." "I'm Wick," he replied. "This is my daughter Lily. You're welcome to warm up a bit before heading back out into that storm." Wick's generosity was rooted in his own history. After his wife's sudden death from a brain aneurysm 3 years before, he had scraped by on his mechanic's wages, raising Lily alone in a modest apartment above a hardware store. Friends and strangers had helped him through bleak moments. Now it felt natural to pay that kindness forward. As the diner emptied and the rain showed no sign of letting up, he offered Elena a ride to wherever they were staying. A flash of fear crossed her face. "We're in our van," she admitted. "The motel asked for money we don't have." On the drive, Ethan bombarded Wick with questions about carburetors and spark plugs. Noah stared out the window, lips moving as he read silently from a tattered book. Hannah and Sophie nestled against Lily, absorbing her warmth. When they reached the dilapidated minivan, Wick saw plastic bags stuffed with clothes and a baby seat wedged between boxes of canned beans. He couldn't bring himself to leave them there. "My couch isn't fancy, but it's dry," he offered. "Stay with us tonight. We'll figure it out in the morning." Elena hesitated, torn between pride and desperation, then nodded. "Just until I can get back on my feet." Wick's apartment had never felt small until that night. Children's shoes lined up by the door, blankets spread across the living room floor, and soft snoring filled the space that was usually quiet save for the drone of the refrigerator. Lily delighted in having temporary siblings. She and the twins built a fort out of couch cushions, while Wick laid out sheets and pillows. Ethan positioned himself near the door to stand guard, a habit born from too many nights in unfamiliar parking lots. "Thank you," she whispered to Wick as they sat at the kitchen table over mugs of instant coffee. "My father. He froze my accounts. He's trying to take the kids. I don't know where else to go." "You don't owe me any explanation," he replied. "But no one should have that kind of power. We'll figure it out together." The next morning, Wick headed to the garage with heavy lids and an even heavier heart. He'd been with the shop for years, patching up transmissions and diagnosing check engine lights. When his supervisor called him into the office, he expected a reprimand for being late. Instead, the man's face wore a smug expression. "We heard you've taken in a fugitive," he sneered, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. "A private investigator came by. Said Elena's rich daddy is worried sick and offering rewards. He also hinted that we'd lose some big business contracts if we keep you on." So you have a choice. Keep your job and tell her to go home, or leave with her. You're really going to throw a family onto the street because some billionaire told you to? Wick shot back, anger rising. Business is business, the supervisor shrugged. Don't make this personal. Wick thought of Lily and the 4 children sleeping peacefully on his floor. He remembered nights when he'd gone without dinner to ensure his daughter ate, times when strangers had slipped $20 bills into his hand. Without another word, he tossed his grease rag onto the desk. Families take care of each other, he said. I quit. Fear clenched his stomach as he walked out. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and his savings were thin. But he felt an unfamiliar lightness, as if he had chosen the right hill on which to make a stand. At home, he told Elena what had happened. She apologized through tears, but he shook his head. You didn't cause this, he reassured her. Your father did. Over the next few days, the consequences of standing up to a billionaire became painfully clear. The landlord called twice, citing the clause in the lease about overnight guests and threatening eviction. 2 men in suits knocked on Wick's door, serving Elena with court papers for an emergency custody hearing. A black sedan idled outside at odd hours. A letter from Child Protective Services arrived, scheduling a welfare check. Each new blow chipped away at their sense of security. I need to see where the children sleep, the caseworker said gently when she visited. She inspected the apartment, noting the clean clothes folded neatly in laundry baskets and the soup simmering on the stove. She spoke privately with Ethan and Noah, asking about school and their feelings. We're safe with Mom and Wick, Ethan told her firmly. Grandpa only cares about money. The law cares about stability, she replied. I'll do what I can. After the caseworker left, Elena broke down. He's going to take them, she sobbed. He'll win. He always wins. What if he doesn't? Wick responded. He leaned forward. Tell me everything. Maybe we have more power than you think. With hands shaking, Elena recounted her past. Growing up in a gilded cage, meeting Jack at university, daring to love someone her father deemed unworthy. She told Wick about the day Charles had cut her off, about living on military bases with Jack and chasing toddlers across barracks lawns. She described Jack's final deployment and the knock on the door that shattered her world. She admitted she still had one lifeline. A letter Jack wrote before leaving, entrusted to a lawyer friend, containing proof that Charles diverted charity funds into his own accounts. That letter could change everything, Wick said. It shows your father isn't acting out of love for his grandkids. He's covering his tracks. Using it means exposing the kids to a huge fight, she whispered. I was trying to avoid that. They called Marcus, Jack's lawyer friend, who confirmed he still had the letter and offered to represent Elena pro bono. Marcus advised them to gather character references and evidence of stability. He warned that Charles's team would paint Elena as unstable and unfit, using her job changes and lack of housing against her. But he also promised that the truth, coupled with community support, could sway a judge. Word spread through Springfield's tight-knit circles. Marlene, the diner waitress, wrote a statement about Elena's reliability and work ethic. Wick's elderly neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, described seeing the children playing happily and Elena sewing late into the night. Lily drew a picture of her family that now included 4 new siblings and a smiling Miss Elena, which Marcus planned to show the judge. Meanwhile, Charles escalated his tactics. He froze Elena's remaining accounts, called the landlord again, and made veiled threats about code violations. He even reached out to local reporters, spinning a story about a mentally unstable woman abducting her own children. She refuses treatment, he told one journalist in a calculated voice. I just want my grandbabies safe. On the eve of the hearing, Wick sat with Ethan at the kitchen table, teaching him how to replace a spark plug. Ethan's brow furrowed in concentration. Do you think the judge will listen to us? He asked. Judges are people, Wick said. They want what's best for kids. You speak your truth. That's all you can do. Lily, Hannah, and Sophie sat in the living room, braiding each other's hair and whispering about the big day. Despite the fear, their laughter brought moments of normalcy. Wick and Elena exchanged a glance that held gratitude and an unspoken acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. The courthouse was a world away from their cozy, cluttered apartment. Polished marble floors echoed their footsteps as they entered, passing reporters and curious townspeople. Judge Meredith Johnson presided over a wood-paneled courtroom packed with observers. Charles sat at a long table with a phalanx of attorneys in dark suits. His white hair was perfectly combed, his expression meticulously sympathetic. Elena and Marcus sat at the other table. Wick squeezed her hand before taking a seat behind her with Lily and the other children. Charles's attorney began by painting Elena as a drifting single mother incapable of providing stability. He presented lists of jobs she'd held, addresses she'd moved through, and bank statements showing depleted funds. He spoke of her erratic decision-making and refusal to accept her father's help. The words stung because they held kernels of truth, but they ignored context and love. Marcus rose slowly and called his first witness, Wick. On the stand, under oath, Wick's voice trembled at first, but grew steady. He described the rainy night at the diner, the hungry eyes, and the feeling in his gut that he couldn't look away. He talked about quitting his job because no family should be torn apart for convenience. He recounted teaching Ethan to change oil, reading bedtime stories to the twins, helping Lily share her toys without jealousy. When Marcus asked why he had risked his livelihood, Wick paused. "Because I remember when I needed help," he said. "And someone helped me. Family isn't always who you're born to. It's who stands beside you." Marlene testified next, her voice roughened by years of late nights. She spoke of Elena never missing a shift at the diner until Charles froze her pay. Mr. Jenkins shuffled to the front, leaning on his cane, and said he felt safer knowing Wick and Elena lived upstairs. Ms. Peterson, the caseworker, confirmed that the children were well cared for and happy. Finally, Marcus held up a sealed envelope. "Your Honor, this letter was written by Jack Charlesworth, Elena's late husband, to be opened in the event of his death," he explained. The judge allowed its admission. Marcus unfolded the pages and read Jack's words aloud. Jack wrote of his love for Elena and their children, his distrust of Charles, and his discovery of financial misconduct at the Charlesworth Foundation. He included documentation proving millions diverted into shell companies. Gasps broke out around the courtroom. Charles's jaw clenched, color draining from his face. He whispered fiercely to his lawyers, who fumbled with binders and statutes. Judge Johnson requested copies of the documents and recessed briefly to review them. During the break, Charles approached Elena. "You think this letter saves you?" he murmured, venom beneath his polished tone. "You're a foolish girl. I built this empire. You'll never take it down." "I don't want your empire," Elena replied calmly. "I want my children, and I want you to stop hurting people." When court reconvened, Judge Johnson's voice carried a new sharpness. "The evidence suggests Mr. Charlesworth's motives are less about the children's welfare than about concealing illegal activities," she declared. "Until investigations are complete, I deny his petition for custody. Ms. Charlesworth, you are awarded full custody of your children. Mr. Wick, thank you for your testimony and for your community service. Child Protective Services will assist in providing resources for your family." Relief crashed over Wick and Elena like a wave. The children hugged each other, tears streaming down faces both young and weathered. Charles erupted, pointing fingers and shouting about conspiracies. Bailiffs escorted him from the courtroom. Cameras flashed as reporters whispered into microphones about the billionaire undone by his own greed and a humble mechanic's kindness. The days that followed felt surreal. Elena's story made national news. The heiress who stood up to her father with the help of a stranger. Donations poured into a fund established by Marcus to help the family find stable housing. A church offered them a parsonage to live in temporarily. Anonymous supporters sent groceries and clothes. Charles was indicted on charges of fraud and embezzlement. His accounts were frozen, his properties seized, his name splashed across headlines he couldn't control. Investigators interviewed former employees who corroborated Jack's allegations. For Wick and Elena, the real work had just begun. They moved into the parsonage and began mapping out a future that wasn't defined by running or hiding. Marcus suggested that a combination of Elena's culinary skills and Wick's mechanical expertise could create something unique. The idea of a garage that doubled as a soup kitchen sparked enthusiasm in both. With donations and loans from community development funds, they rented a shuttered warehouse on the edge of town. Volunteers cleaned and painted walls. Ethan and Noah helped assemble workbenches, while Lily and the twins painted a colorful mural of cars and vegetables along one wall. Wick's garage and kitchen opened its doors one crisp spring morning. During the day, customers brought in cars for tune-ups and brake jobs. In the evening, the smell of fresh bread and stew replaced the scent of motor oil. Elena and her children ladled soup while Wick and Ethan wiped grease from their hands and sat down to eat with their neighbors. Marlene coordinated a roster of volunteers, and Mr. Jenkins entertained kids with tales of the town's history. A small sign near the entrance read, "Pay what you can. If today is not your day, let us serve you." Word spread quickly. People who had never interacted before found themselves seated across from one another at long tables. Farmers and lawyers, single parents and retirees, teenagers with tattoos and church elders. They shared stories over bowls of chili and traded fresh eggs for alternator repairs. A sense of community that had been fractured by economic hardship began to mend. For Wick, watching Lily laugh with Hannah and Sophie as they learned to roll dough, or seeing Ethan confidently explain a transmission issue to a nervous customer, brought a fullness to his heart he hadn't felt since before his wife died. As months turned into a year, Elena and Wick's partnership deepened. They took long walks through downtown, holding coffee cups and discussing budgets and weekend plans. They visited Jack's grave together, standing in silent gratitude for the man whose foresight had saved their family. They visited Charles in prison once, bringing the children so they could decide if they wanted a relationship with him. The meeting was awkward and painful. Charles looked smaller behind glass, his arrogance replaced by a kind of bewildered regret. He apologized in clipped sentences, but the trust he had shattered would take years to rebuild, if ever. The garage kitchen expanded, adding a classroom where Elena taught cooking and budgeting classes to single parents and young adults. Wick set up an apprenticeship program for teens interested in mechanical work. Donations allowed them to build a small playground behind the building. They hosted holiday dinners where no one paid a cent, and they delivered food to shut-ins during snowstorms. News crews returned occasionally to film follow-ups about the billionaire's daughter feeding the poor. But the novelty soon faded, replaced by genuine community support. On the first anniversary of the custody hearing, Wick stood outside the garage looking at a handmade banner that read, "Kindness builds families." People were arriving with casseroles and pies for a potluck celebration. He saw Lily racing with the twins through the grass, Ethan helping a younger boy adjust a bike chain, and Elena approaching with flour on her cheek and a smile that reached her eyes. He thought about the chain of events, a rainy night, a simple question, a decision to share a meal, and felt humbled by how fragile life is and how powerful a single act of compassion can be. "We've come a long way," he said softly as Elena joined him. "And we're just getting started," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his. Their story became part of Springfield's lore, told at PTA meetings and church socials. Parents used it to teach their children about empathy. Social workers cited it when advocating for community support networks. Even in prison, Charles's downfall served as a cautionary tale in business ethics lectures. Wick and Elena's children grew up with a blended sense of heritage. Lily telling classmates she had two mothers watching over her, Hannah explaining that you can be both a princess and a mechanic, Ethan vowing to become an engineer who designs affordable cars. Their family tree had been grafted together, not by DNA, but by decisions rooted in kindness. It is easy to look at the world and feel powerless against the influence of money and status. Wick and Elena's journey reminds us that power also resides in quiet choices. The choice to share a sandwich, to open your door to strangers, to stand up to injustice even when you're outmatched. Those choices ripple outward, inspiring others and sometimes dismantling systems that seem impenetrable. Their story is proof that generosity can expose greed, that community can outshine isolation, and that families are built by the people who show up day after day with love. If this narrative touched you, please consider what kindness you might extend to someone today. Share this story so others remember that compassion is contagious. And join us next time for more tales of ordinary people who, through simple acts of courage, reshape destinies.